Chief Medical Officer Vix stared in horror at the small, unassuming room that had been designated as the human quarters aboard the Galactic Confederation research vessel Harmony. More specifically, she was staring at the miniature food preparation area that human Jack had installed. According to ship regulations, it was completely unauthorized. "You cannot be serious," Vix's antennae twitched nervously as she catalogued the numerous violations with her upper eyes, while her lower pair remained fixed on Jack. "This is a Class 3 biohazard situation at minimum." Jack, the only human aboard and their xenobiology specialist, merely smiled and continued chopping something red and pulpy on a wooden board. The knife in his hand moved with alarming speed. "It's just a kitchen, Vix," he said, scraping the red chunks into a bowl. "Humans need to cook. It helps with morale." "Those are capsicums," Vix noted, reading from her scanner. "They contain capsaicin, a neurotoxin that causes pain responses in most species." "Bell peppers," Jack corrected. "Barely any capsaicin at all. The hot ones are still in stasis." Vix's exoskeleton clicked as she tensed. "You brought hotter ones?" The human nodded enthusiastically. "Ghost peppers, Carolina Reapers, for special occasions." Captain Wren entered, his blue scales shimmering under the lights. As the ship's commanding officer and a level 4 aquatic species, he was particularly vulnerable to terrestrial contaminants. "Medical Officer Vix, I received your urgent report about, what did you call it? A death zone in the human quarters?" Jack sighed. "It's a kitchenette, Captain. Standard human cooking equipment." Wren approached cautiously, his gill slits flaring at the unfamiliar scents. "What is that aroma?" "Garlic, onions, and olive oil," Jack replied. "The base for most Earth cuisines." Vix frantically consulted her scanner. "Captain, allium species contain organosulfur compounds that are toxic to multiple Confederation species. And the oil, it's almost pure fat." Jack rolled his eyes. "Everything's in sealed containers when not in use. I'm trained in xenobiological safety, remember." "Yet you're preparing these toxins without even wearing gloves," Wren observed. "Humans have evolved alongside these plants for thousands of years," Jack explained, adding something green and leafy to the mixture. "They're not just edible to us, they're delicious and nutritious." "What about cross-contamination?" Vix demanded. "These surfaces could transfer trace amounts to communal areas." "I clean thoroughly after cooking," Jack assured them. "Military-grade disinfectant. Nothing leaves this room." An alarm suddenly blared from Vix's scanner. "Captain, he's activating a thermal device." Jack had merely turned on the stovetop. A blue flame appeared, and he set a pan atop it. "You're creating fire inside a spacecraft?" Wren's voice rose to a pitch Jack had never heard before. "It's contained," Jack explained, pouring olive oil into the pan. "Earth ships have had cooking facilities since our earliest space programs. Morale booster. Your species finds comfort in playing with dangerous chemicals and fire?" Vix couldn't hide her disbelief. Jack smiled as he added the vegetables to the sizzling pan. "Wait until dessert. I'm making caramelized sugar with concentrated ethanol extract." Vix's scanner emitted another urgent warning. "Captain, I'm detecting rapidly increasing levels of acetic acids, alcohols, and aldehydes." "That's just the smell of good cooking," Jack said, stirring the mixture. "Nothing dangerous." Wren and Vix exchanged concerned glances. The human had been an excellent crew member, brilliant in his field, respectful of protocols, friendly to all species aboard. But this revelation about their eating habits was disturbing. "Jack," the captain said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss alternative accommodation for your nutritional requirements." The human looked up from his cooking. "You want me to stop? For safety reasons," Vix interjected quickly. Jack's face fell, and both aliens felt an unexpected pang of empathy. The human's disappointment was palpable. "I was planning to make enough for anyone who wanted to try it," Jack said quietly. "Sharing food is important to humans. It builds community." The captain and medical officer shared another look, this one uncertain. "You wish to share these toxins?" Wren asked. Jack nodded. "With proper safety precautions for each species, of course. I've studied everyone's biochemistry." 2 cycles later, the ship's mess hall hosted an unprecedented event. Human cuisine. Night. Jack had spent days consulting with Vix to ensure safety for all attendees. The compromise had been extensive. Separate ventilation systems were installed, multiple buffer zones established, decontamination stations placed at strategic intervals. Jack wore a sealed chef's uniform that Vix had specially designed. Overkill from his perspective, but he'd agreed to humor her concerns. "Welcome, everyone," Jack announced to the curious gathering of crew members. Each species sat at separate tables with specialized environmental controls. "Tonight, I'll introduce you to the concept of human cooking, with appropriate modifications for your respective biologies." Engineer Lox, a silicon-based life form with crystalline appendages, raised a limb. "Is it true you manipulate deadly nightshades for pleasure?" "Well, tomatoes are in the nightshade family, yes," Jack admitted, "along with potatoes and eggplants, but they're perfectly safe for humans." "Fascinating," murmured Navigator Pell, her gelatinous form shimmering with interest. "And you intentionally ferment substances until they produce intoxicants? Wine, beer, cheese. Fermentation is a cornerstone of human cuisine," Jack confirmed. "It preserves food and creates complex flavors." Captain Wren addressed the gathered crew. "This event has been approved with extensive safety protocols. Medical Officer Vix will monitor everything. Each species will receive only compatible analogs of human dishes." Jack began serving, starting with the most compatible species. For the methane breathers, he'd created molecular gastronomy versions using elements they could metabolize. For silicon-based life forms, mineral compounds that approximated human flavors. Vix hovered nearby, scanner constantly whirring. "The captain's portion contains no alicinoids or capsaicinoids," she confirmed, as Jack presented Wren with a bowl. Wren studied the food cautiously before taking a small taste. His eyes widened. "This is quite remarkable," he admitted. "The chemical reactions create fascinating sensations," Jack beamed. "That's the idea. Cooking transforms simple ingredients into something greater than the sum of their parts." As the evening progressed, most crew members found something to appreciate in their specialized dishes. Some even requested seconds, after Vix confirmed it was safe. Security Chief Gant, an imposing arthropoid, chittered appreciatively after sampling a dish adjusted for his physiology. "The chemical complexity is impressive. You deliberately create these Maillard reactions?" "Exactly," Jack grinned. "The browning of proteins and sugars creates hundreds of new flavor compounds." Vix reluctantly joined the tasting after triple-checking her scanner. "I must admit, these modified compounds create interesting sensory input, though I still don't understand why you'd evolve to enjoy pain receptors being triggered," she added, referring to the mild capsaicin analog Jack had included in her portion. "That's the beauty of it," Jack explained. "Humans enjoy controlled adversity. The mild discomfort of spice creates endorphins, a natural high." Communications Officer Zed, who'd been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Your species finds pleasure in substances that objectively should cause distress. Is this related to your Deathworld origins?" The room fell silent. Deathworld was considered impolite terminology in diplomatic circles. Jack nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe. Earth forced us to adapt to a wide range of conditions and threats. We learned to transform potential dangers into benefits. What doesn't kill us becomes dinner." Engineer Lox's crystals clinked together in what Jack recognized as laughter. "You humans are truly bizarre." "Perhaps," Captain Wren interjected, "but that adaptability makes them valuable allies." Jack smiled, serving the final course. "Wait until I introduce you to dessert. Humans have an entire category of food that serves no nutritional purpose except pleasure." Vix's scanner beeped alarmingly. "Crystallized sucrose with cocoa alkaloids?" "Chocolate cake," Jack corrected. "The universal language." Word spread quickly throughout the Galactic Confederation. A human who could transform toxic substances into edible, even pleasurable experiences was rare enough. But one willing to adapt those experiences for alien physiologies? That was unprecedented. The Harmony received a new assignment. Diplomatic mission to the Vrel Collective, a notoriously reclusive species who had repeatedly rejected Confederation overtures. Their planet, a sweltering greenhouse world of caustic clouds and high-pressure atmosphere, had valuable resources the Confederation sought access to. They've refused all previous delegations, Captain Wren explained during the mission briefing. But they've specifically requested to meet our food alchemist. Jack looked surprised. Me? I'm a xenobiologist, not a diplomat. Apparently, tales of your culinary adaptations reached them, Wren replied. They're curious about a species that deliberately consumes substances others find toxic. Vix studied her datapad. The Vrel have exceptionally sensitive chemoreceptors. Their entire communication system is based on molecular exchanges. Perhaps they see your cooking as a form of advanced chemical communication? Or they just want dinner and a show, Jack quipped. Preparation for the diplomatic mission consumed Jack's next week. He studied everything available about Vrel biochemistry and communication, developing recipes that would be both safe and meaningful to their unique sensory system. The landing party consisted of Captain Wren, Jack, Vix, for medical safety, and translator Noel, whose specialized implants could interpret the Vrel's chemical language. The Vrel homeworld was exactly as unpleasant as the briefing had suggested. Even in their environmental suits, the landing party felt the crushing pressure and searing heat. The caustic clouds reduced visibility to mere meters. Their hosts emerged from the haze, undulating masses of tentacles and sensory organs, their bodies constantly secreting and absorbing chemicals from the environment. Translator Noel's implants worked furiously. They welcome us, he reported. Particularly they don't have a direct translation. One who speaks through transformed matter. Jack stepped forward, carrying a sealed container. I've prepared something for them. Vix looked alarmed. That wasn't in the mission plan. Trust me, Jack whispered. Through his suit's external manipulators, Jack carefully opened the container, revealing a substance that immediately began to react with the planet's atmosphere. The resulting chemical cascade created patterns of molecules that dispersed in precise formations. The Vrel rippled in what Noel interpreted as excitement. They're amazed, the translator said. You've spoken to them in what they consider high poetry, complex chemical chains that tell a story about transformation and harmony. Jack grinned inside his helmet. It's just a specially modified soufflé. The ingredients react with their atmosphere to create molecular structures similar to their communication patterns. The Vrel leader extended a tentacle, absorbing samples of the chemical reactions. Its body pulsed with colors. They say you understand what most species don't, Noel translated. That all communication is chemistry. All pleasure is molecular interaction. They're impressed that a carbon-based species has such awareness. Captain Wren seized the diplomatic opportunity. We seek to establish regular communication and fair exchange with the Vrel Collective. The negotiation proceeded with unprecedented smoothness. Jack's chemical poetry had broken barriers centuries of conventional diplomacy couldn't breach. By the mission's end, the Vrel had agreed to preliminary resource sharing and ongoing dialogue, with the condition that Jack return for future talks. Back aboard the Harmony, Captain Wren was jubilant. The Admiralty is astounded. They're calling it a diplomatic breakthrough. Jack shrugged. I just did what humans have always done, found common ground through shared experiences. But how did you know it would work? Vix asked, genuinely curious. Cooking is chemistry. All species interact. With chemicals, we just have different relationships with them. Jack smiled. When you understand that a dish isn't just food, but a complex chemical reaction designed to trigger specific responses, you're already halfway to understanding how the Vrel communicate. Navigator Pell drifted into the conversation. The Admiralty has received 17 requests from other species to meet the human food alchemist. You've become quite famous. Jack looked startled. I'm a xenobiologist, not a chef. Perhaps, Captain Wren said thoughtfully, you're both. And perhaps that combination is exactly what the Confederation needs. The Harmony docked at Centaurus Station, the massive hub of Confederation activity in the Orion Arm. Normally, a research vessel's arrival would merit little attention. Today, however, the docking bay bustled with officials, diplomats, and media, representatives from dozens of species. I don't understand all this fuss, Jack muttered as he adjusted his formal uniform. This was his third official reception in as many weeks. "You've become a symbol," Captain Wren explained. "The human who speaks the universal language of molecular gastronomy." Vix scanned the assembled dignitaries with concern. 17 different atmospheric requirements in one room. The containment protocols alone are a nightmare. Admiral Tor, a massive Ursine being and the station's commanding officer, approached with an entourage of officials. "Welcome to Centaurus Station. The Confederation Council is eager to discuss your unique diplomatic approach." Jack was escorted to a specially modified conference chamber. At its center stood what looked suspiciously like a kitchen. "We've constructed this facility according to your specifications," Admiral Tor explained. "Today's diplomatic session will be unconventional." Representatives from 7 species, including 3 that had historically refused Confederation overtures, filed, in each to their own environmentally controlled section. Jack recognized the ambassadors from systems of strategic importance. "The Council proposes establishing a new diplomatic division," Admiral Tor announced. "Culinary diplomacy, with you, Jack, as its first practitioner." Jack blinked in surprise. "I'm a scientist, not a diplomat." "Yet you've achieved more diplomatic breakthroughs in 3 months than our conventional approaches managed in decades," countered a counselor. "The Vrel Collective now engages in regular trade. The Mikra Dominion has opened borders after centuries of isolation. All because you prepared meals that spoke to their biochemistry," added another counselor. "You've transformed potentially toxic substances into bridges between worlds." Jack considered the proposal while absent-mindedly arranging ingredients. "I'll need a proper lab kitchen, and a team of xenobiologists and chemists." "Granted," Admiral Tor said immediately. "Today's session is something of a test case. These 7 representatives have specific diplomatic impasses we hope you might address." Jack surveyed the assembled diplomats, noting their physiological differences. "I'll need their biochemical profiles and cultural context." "Already loaded into your terminal," Vic said, having apparently been briefed before him. For the next 3 hours, Jack worked in what he began mentally calling kitchen diplomacy. For the silicon-based Krith, he created crystalline structures that resonated at frequencies pleasing to their sensory apparatus. For the methane-breathing Jur, compounds that formed meaningful patterns in their atmosphere. The most challenging was the Ocon representative, a being composed primarily of superheated plasma contained within a specialized suit. Jack carefully prepared elements that, when introduced to the ambassador's environment, created spectral emissions in wavelengths that conveyed respect and openness. Barriers that had seemed insurmountable began dissolving. The Krith agreed to sharing crystalline technology previously deemed too sensitive. The Jur offered access to methane refinement techniques that would revolutionize fuel production. Later, in private debriefing, Admiral Tor was candid. "We've been approaching diplomacy wrong for centuries. We focused on words, treaties, legal frameworks, when we should have been focusing on shared experiences." Jack shook his head. "It's not that simple. This is just another tool in diplomatic relations." "A powerful one," Captain Wren observed. "You're creating shared experiences across biological divides that seemed impossible to bridge." "Humans have always done this," Jack explained. "Throughout our history, breaking bread together, sharing food, has been fundamental to building trust and community. I'm just extending that to include beings who don't eat bread." Admiral Tor nodded thoughtfully. "This approach fits with what we know of human history. Your species has always excelled at adaptation, turning potential threats into advantages. Every ingredient in my kitchen would be considered a biohazard by Confederation standards," Jack admitted. "But to humans, their culture, comfort, connection." "Perhaps," Vic suggested, "that's the lesson other species need to learn from humans. That adversity can be transformed into opportunity." "Or perhaps," Jack said with a smile, "the lesson is simpler. Everyone enjoys a good meal." The newly established Culinary Diplomacy Corps headquarters buzzed with activity. In the 6 months since its formation, Jack had assembled a team of 15 specialists, a mixture of human chefs with xenobiology training and alien biochemists with culinary interests. "Molecular harmonization for the Drift Collective is at 92% compatibility," reported Alan, a gastronomic engineer from Earth. Their phosphoric silicon biochemistry responds well to the crystalline formations we're developing. Jack nodded, surveying the lab kitchen's multiple stations. Each was dedicated to a different biochemical profile. Some working with gases, others with plasma, still others with crystalline structures or exotic elements rare in human cuisine. Vix, who had transferred from the Harmony to become the Corps' chief medical officer, approached with a datapad. 3 new diplomatic requests arrived today. The Admiralty has prioritized the NX-Tali situation. Jack frowned. The hive mind species? They've been at war with the Praxis Federation for decades. Precisely, Vix confirmed. Both sides have agreed to preliminary discussions with you as mediator. Mediation through molecular gastronomy, Jack mused. What's the biochemical compatibility? That's the challenging part, Vix admitted. The NX-Tali share a collective digestive system. Their soldiers cannot eat the same compounds as their thinkers or workers. The Praxis are individual organisms, but with strict hierarchical consumption protocols. So we need multiple dishes that somehow connect to each other, Jack reasoned. A meal that tells a cohesive story across different biochemistries. The preparation for the NX-Tali Praxis Summit consumed weeks. Jack's team analyzed centuries of conflict history, identifying symbolic elements important to both cultures. The summit location, a neutral space station, was modified with specialized containment fields to accommodate both species' environmental needs and the experimental culinary diplomacy approach. This is unprecedented, Admiral Tor confided to Jack. Before the delegates arrived, they've been killing each other for generations. If you can create even a temporary ceasefire, it would be remarkable. Jack felt the weight of expectation. No pressure then. The NX-Tali arrived first. A pulsating mass of interconnected organisms, functioning as specialized units of a single consciousness. Their diplomat form extended sensory appendages while the guard forms created a protective perimeter. The Praxis delegation entered from the opposite side. Tall, angular beings with exoskeletons that shifted colors to indicate rank and emotional state. Their high commander's carapace gleamed with bioluminescent patterns signifying wary authority. Initial introductions were tense, centuries of hostility evident in the rigid postures and chemical signals both species emitted. Before formal negotiations begin, Admiral Tor announced, human diplomat Jack will present a shared experience in the tradition of Earth diplomatic customs. Jack stepped forward, indicating the central chamber where his team had arranged what looked like art installations rather than food. For the NX-Tali Collective, he began, gesturing to a series of interconnected vessels containing swirling compounds. I've prepared nutrient streams that flow between your different castes, symbolizing how strength comes from unity and specialization. The NX-Tali diplomat form extended sensory tendrils toward the creation, analyzing its molecular structure. For the Praxis Federation, Jack continued, indicating crystalline structures arranged in precise hierarchical patterns. Compounds that honor your social organization while highlighting the importance of each individual to the whole. The Praxis High Commander's exoskeleton flickered with cautious interest. Both meals, Jack explained, contain trace elements from a shared source, a nebula at the border of your territories that birthed both your star systems. You are, in the most fundamental sense, made of the same cosmic material. A murmur passed through both delegations. This meal is meant to be consumed simultaneously, Jack instructed. Each bite, each absorption, will release compounds that, when combined in the station's atmospheric filters, will create a unique molecular pattern, visible to both species. What followed was unlike any diplomatic meeting in Confederation history. As both species consumed their specially designed nourishment, the chamber's atmosphere began to shimmer with complex molecular patterns, telling the shared history of their region of space before their civilizations existed. The NX-Tali Collective pulsed with new patterns. The translator rendered it, "We consume the memory of stars that came before us." The Praxis High Commander's carapace displayed colors previously unseen in diplomatic settings. The nebula-born recognize each other, the translator interpreted. The meal's end? Something had fundamentally shifted. The negotiations that followed were still difficult, territories and resources hotly contested, but the fundamental premise, that both species were irreconcilably alien to each other, had been undermined by Jack's molecular storytelling. 3 days later, the first ceasefire in 70 years was signed. Admiral Tor found Jack in his lab, already working on preparations for the next diplomatic mission. "The Admiralty is calling it a miracle," Tor said. Jack shook his head. "Not a miracle. Just chemistry, history, and a good meal." "You're being modest," Tor insisted. "You've invented an entirely new form of diplomacy." "Actually," Jack replied, "it's one of humanity's oldest forms. Breaking bread together, or whatever the equivalent is for each species, creates connections that logic alone can't achieve." 2 years into the Culinary Diplomacy Corps' existence, Jack found himself in an unexpected position, defending the program before the Confederation Security Council. The diplomatic successes had been remarkable. 17 formerly hostile species, now engaged in peaceful trade. 3 long-standing territorial disputes resolved. First contact successfully established with 2 previously isolated civilizations. But not everyone was pleased. "The Security Council will come to order," announced the chair being, a massive gas giant native whose translator rendered their atmospheric fluctuations into standard. "We address concerns regarding the human diplomatic methods." Jack stood alone, at the petitioner's podium. Captain Wren and Admiral Tor had offered to accompany him, but he declined. This was, at its core, about humanity's place in the Confederation. Representative Zoll, a hive mind species from the Conservative Regulatory Coalition, initiated the proceedings. "The human approach to diplomacy fundamentally undermines Confederation protocols. They deliberately manipulate biochemistry to influence diplomatic outcomes." "That's a rather severe characterization," Jack responded calmly. "We create shared experiences that bridge biological differences." "By introducing potentially hazardous compounds," countered Representative Moore, a silicon-based life form. "Compounds that, under normal circumstances, would be classified as dangerous." Jack nodded. "Every kitchen contains potential hazards. The point is, what we create with them." The debate intensified as the Security Council raised various concerns. The unpredictability of human methods, the lack of traditional diplomatic frameworks, the potential for biochemical manipulation to cross ethical boundaries. "The core issue," Representative Zoll stated bluntly, "is that humans have turned their death world adaptations into diplomatic tools. You've weaponized your tolerance for toxins." A murmur ran through the chamber at the provocative statement. Jack paused, considering his response carefully. This wasn't just about diplomatic methods, but about humanity's fundamental approach to existence. "With respect," he finally said, "I believe you misunderstand humanity's relationship with our homeworld." He activated the chamber's holographic display, showing Earth's diverse environments and life forms. "Earth isn't a death world to us, it's home. Yes, it contains compounds toxic to many species. Yes, we've evolved to not just survive, but thrive among these compounds. But we don't see adversity as something to simply endure. We transform it." Jack displayed images of human culinary history, ancient fermentation practices, the discovery of cooking with fire, the global exchange of ingredients through trade and exploration. "When humans encountered bitter plants, we didn't just develop tolerance, we cultivated them into coffee and chocolate. When we found bacteria and fungi that could spoil our food, we harnessed them to create cheese, yogurt, wine, and bread. We turned potential threats into sources of pleasure and connection." The chamber was silent now, all representatives focused on Jack's presentation. "This isn't weaponization," Jack continued. "It's transformation. It's taking the challenging aspects of existence and creating something meaningful from them. And that's precisely what diplomacy should do. Transform potential conflict into cooperation." He displayed results from the past 2 years. Trade agreements, peace treaties, newly opened borders. The Culinary Diplomacy Corps doesn't manipulate or coerce. We create environments where different species can recognize their shared interests despite their differences. Just as humans learn to transform potentially dangerous ingredients into meals that bring people together. Representative Moore's crystalline structure shifted thoughtfully. "Your approach lacks the predictability of traditional diplomatic protocols." "Because life itself isn't predictable," Jack replied. "The Confederation brings together beings with radically different biologies, psychologies, and histories. Sometimes formalized protocols create barriers rather than bridges." The chair being called for a recess, during which Jack received an unexpected visitor, Representative Zoll's secondary node. "Your arguments are compelling," the hive mind segment admitted. "But many species find human adaptability unsettling." Jack nodded. "Change often is. But consider this. Every species in the Confederation has adapted to their own unique challenges. Humans don't claim superiority because we can eat capsaicin or drink fermented beverages. We simply offer our particular adaptations in service to the whole." When the council reconvened, the tone had shifted. While concerns remained, the fundamental question had evolved from whether human methods were dangerous to how they could be properly integrated into Confederation diplomatic frameworks. "The council proposes continued authorization for the Culinary Diplomacy Corps," the chair being announced, "with expanded oversight protocols and formalized ethical guidelines." Jack accepted the conditions readily. "Humans understand the importance of recipes," he quipped, earning ripples of translator-mediated amusement from several representatives. As the session concluded, Admiral Tor met Jack outside the chamber. "Well navigated. They came in suspicious and left curious, the hallmark of effective diplomacy." Jack smiled. "I just helped them see that what looks like danger from one perspective might be opportunity from another. The quintessential human viewpoint," Tor observed. "Perhaps that's your species' greatest contribution to the Confederation. Not just tolerating the universe's hazards, but transforming them into something beneficial for all." 5 years after the first human cuisine night aboard the Harmony, Jack stood in the gleaming central atrium of the newly constructed Interspecies Culinary Academy on Earth. Delegates from over 30 Confederation species had gathered for the inauguration ceremony. The first time so many different species had visited humanity's homeworld simultaneously. The logistics had been staggering. Environmental suits for some, specialized atmosphere chambers for others, gravity adjustments, radiation shields. But the effort demonstrated Earth's commitment to its role in the Confederation. "Welcome to Earth," Jack addressed the assembled delegates, his voice translated into 27 different communication forms. "A world that many of you once classified as a death world, now hosting the Confederation's first center for interspecies culinary diplomacy. Captain Wren, now Admiral Wren and the Confederation's liaison to Earth, stood nearby with other dignitaries. Vix, promoted to Director of Xenobiological Safety, monitored environmental controls with her characteristic thoroughness. 5 years ago," Jack continued, "I installed an unauthorized kitchen aboard a research vessel. Today, we inaugurate an entire academy dedicated to the principle that sharing food, or the closest analog each species has to food, creates understanding that transcends our biological differences." He gestured to the academy's multiple teaching kitchens, each designed for different biochemistries. "Here, students from across the Confederation will learn not just how to create safe and pleasurable molecular experiences for other species, but how to translate their own culinary traditions into forms others can appreciate." The first class of 60 students, 15 humans and 45 members of other species, stood at attention nearby. They represented the pioneers of this new diplomatic discipline. What began as a simple human tradition, breaking bread together, has evolved into a sophisticated diplomatic approach, Jack explained. But its essence remains the same: transformation, taking raw ingredients, or raw conflicts, and transforming them into something harmonious. Admiral Wren stepped forward to address the gathering. "The Culinary Diplomacy Corps has facilitated 23 peace treaties, 41 trade agreements, and first contact protocols with 5 previously isolated civilizations. What started as an unauthorized kitchen has become one of the Confederation's most valuable diplomatic assets." The ceremony continued with representatives from various species sharing their experiences of human culinary diplomacy. The Vrel diplomat described how molecular gastronomy had opened their isolated society to beneficial exchange. The Anxtali and Praxis representatives, now trading partners, jointly presented a commemorative plaque. After the formal proceedings, Jack led tours through the Academy's facilities. In one teaching kitchen, human chefs demonstrated the art of caramelization, the controlled burning of sugars to create complex flavors. "Remarkable," observed a methane-breathing delegate. "You deliberately apply destructive processes to create something better than the original substance." "That's cooking in a nutshell," Jack agreed. "Controlled transformation through heat, fermentation, cutting, blending, changing raw ingredients into something greater than the sum of their parts. In another section, alien biochemists demonstrated how they had adapted their own cultural practices into forms humans could appreciate, not through the sense of taste, necessarily, but through other sensory experiences. The Krith instructor created crystalline structures that, when subjected to specific frequencies, produced harmonics that humans found beautiful. Not food as you understand it, the instructor explained, but still a shared pleasure. As the day concluded, Jack found himself standing with Admiral Wren and Director Vix on the Academy's observation deck, watching Earth's sunset paint the sky in colors some of their visitors couldn't even perceive. "I still remember your face when you first discovered my little kitchen," Jack told Vix with a smile. "You were convinced I was going to poison the entire crew." Vix's antennae twitched with amusement. By Confederation standards, everything in that kitchen was indeed a biohazard. "I wasn't wrong." "No," Jack conceded, "but you learned to see beyond the potential danger to the actual benefit." Admiral Wren gazed out at the sunset. "Perhaps that's humanity's greatest lesson to the Confederation. Your species doesn't just survive adversity, you transform it into opportunity. Where others see toxins, you see spices. Where others see danger, you see possibility." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "Humans have always been adapters and transformers. We take what our environment gives us, however challenging, and find ways to not just endure it, but celebrate it." "A powerful evolutionary strategy," Vix observed. "And now," Admiral Wren added, "a powerful diplomatic one as well." As darkness fell over the Academy, lights from various environmental chambers glowed, with different colors, each housing beings from worlds humans once could only dream of visiting. Inside each chamber, representatives of profoundly different evolutionary paths shared experiences that bridged their biological differences. Jack watched with satisfaction as a human student carefully prepared a molecular structure for a silicon-based life form, while nearby, a methane breather demonstrated its cultural feeding rituals to fascinated human observers. "Every ingredient in the Death Worlder's kitchen was a biohazard," Vix mused, echoing the concerns of that first day aboard the Harmony. "Yet from those biohazards came one of our greatest diplomatic breakthroughs." "That's humanity for you," Jack replied with a smile. "We've been turning poisons into pleasures for thousands of years. It's what we do best." And across the Academy, beings who once would have found Earth's environment hostile or lethal raised their various appendages in a universal gesture of appreciation. A toast to the species that had learned not just to survive among toxins, but to transform them into bridges between worlds.